Yes, I've definitely become 10x more bullish. The fact is that Bitcoin is the hardest money. That essentially means, if you look at history, that it will be adopted by humanity. The hardest money is always kind of the one that gets adopted. Bitcoin is inevitable. The question is, how long will that take? How did gold become the world reserve currency? There was lots of different currencies. There was seashells, there was glass beads. These different cultures would collide. One of those cultures would realize that they could create the other culture's money easier than the money that they were using. This is the new monetary revolution. It does give humans an unprecedented form of freedom that we've never enjoyed before because of, basically the centralized ties of money and hard money. Gold, the hardest money that the world had before Bitcoin, is inherently centralized just because its inability to move. I guess the hard thing is like for people to know that their purchasing power is being taken away from them. Because if you don't know it, then there is no reason to understand Bitcoin. And if there's no reason to understand Bitcoin, then you likely will ignore it. Read a Bitcoin book, and if that energizes you, read another one. The whole idea of like investing, like the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and real estate too, is because our money doesn't hold its value. These things exist only because people need to have an ulterior way to save value over time. And then it became very simple. Spend less than you make, you save in Bitcoin, and that's it. The secret to life. And it's really like that simple. Just be valuable, have valuable skills, spend less than you earn, and save in Bitcoin. Those three things, you might not become insanely wealthy person, but you'll be able to live and know that your purchasing power won't be taken away from you without even knowing it. It's a financial system for everyone in the world. There are people that are left out of our current financial system. It's super detrimental to their lives. People living in the US and general Western countries, like we don't really get to see that or experience that much because, banking just works for us. Money, for the most part, just works. We're not at risk of the whole thing collapsing tomorrow. And I think that's like a detriment to a lot of people in Western countries kind of learning about Bitcoin is because they have financial privilege. There's a disconnect between people in the West understanding and not understanding Bitcoin. I think if you bring these types of conversations to people in Latin America, people in the global South and Africa, it's much easier to bridge the gap of understanding how their political currency is not what they want to save with. Whereas like in, the US, we have lots of different vehicles to save wealth over time that have necessarily like come about because, our financial system is inflationary. And so you really can't just like store cash under your mattress, but we've access to all those things. Without having access to those things, I think it becomes easier to understand Bitcoin. That is also a really powerful thing. It's just not fair for people outside of Western countries to just be excluded from the ability to save just because they're not in a country that operates in either the US dollar system or the euro system or any other major financial system around the world. How do we have the most fair capitalist system that we can have? And I think it has to be on a Bitcoin standard. The closer you are to the money printer, i.e. the closer you are to banks and your ability to get cheap debt, you have an outsized ability to create wealth for yourself than people who don't have access to that. There's just this like huge inequality in who has access to the money printer and how they can basically use that to their advantage to stay in power, to stay wealthy. People that have a lot of Bitcoin don't have any more influence over the operation of the system than someone who has, one Satoshi. One Bitcoin now is like $100,000. This year, I could see anything happening from 0.2 million to 2 million. We kind of want this to happen slowly. The problem is the absolute scarcity of Bitcoin may actually cause it to happen very quickly because there's not a lot of supply, right? And there's continually diminished supply coming onto the market every 4 years. And so the people who have not been slowly accumulating it, even at like, very, very small amounts, they're just not going to have the opportunity to transfer their monetary premium from one asset and their value that they've accrued over time, from working and whatever, their time, energy over the course of their career into this other asset that is actually a better store of time and energy. You don't need to go all in. You just need to understand that there is an alternative system, a system that is fairer for everyone in the world and that will allow you to save your purchasing power over time better than any other function or investment in the world. Once you kind of wrap your head around all those positive externalities, it's just like there is no other solution, and that's why you get toxic Bitcoin maxis, right? So you get these people that are just like, well, obviously this is going to be fixed by Bitcoin. And I can tell you people are like, stop saying Bitcoin fixes this. The problem is it does. When you understand Bitcoin, you realize that Bitcoin is, the hardest form of money. If you're not accumulating Bitcoin, you're making a mistake. And so all companies that aren't accumulating Bitcoin are making a mistake. And someone was like, yeah, I'm never going to buy a stock that doesn't involve some sort of Bitcoin treasury anymore, because it's just like, that's how I see the world. This is how I value the world. And if that company is not like acquiring Bitcoin, they're holding large amounts of cash, then it's like, that's a fault of their strategy. We could have every country in the world basically accumulating and hoarding Bitcoin. In 10, 20 years, that Bitcoin might be $10 million. Right now, you might have one Bitcoin, but in 20 years, you might have half a Bitcoin. You're still wealthier than you were with one Bitcoin because the value is much higher, at least in fiat terms. But you've disseminated your Bitcoin out into the world. AI is going to be like, Bitcoin is a good idea, maybe we should use it. Even if like humans don't exist anymore, this network isn't going anywhere. It's beyond the point of no return. It's not like MySpace to the Facebook, but it's like kind of like the internet, whereas like once the protocol was laid, protocols aren't changing. And so the Bitcoin protocol has been laid, it's been adopted, and it's not going to change, at least in the way that matters in terms of its properties of money. Tokens are bullshit. Like that is kind of the scam and the bullshit of the crypto industry, is like everything needs to have a token. Crypto was just remaking fiat in a private way that is actually worse than the fiat that we already have. There's literally 10 million cryptos. When I started learning about this, there was like 20,000. The inflation rate of cryptocurrencies, it's hyperinflating. The amount of cryptos there are in the world, we might be at an inflection point where it is becoming so insane, the level of coining and scamming. It makes me want to puke, I'm just like, are you kidding me? This is not what this is about. And it's really embarrassing, to be honest. It actually seems more complicated to produce yield on crypto than it would in using traditional finance. It's very complicated. And if you try to like understand some projects, some of them are overtly scams, right? And so they're just like not meant to be understood. But the ones that are still scams, but don't think that they're scams, like they're trying to innovate on the technology, they're still quite complicated to understand. And if you like try to read the Ethereum roadmap, ignore all the dumb names of the different phases, but just to like try to understand what exactly sharding is. This seems really dumb. I think most Bitcoiners are here for righteous reasons, right? And the whole entirety of the crypto ecosystem kind of is the antithesis of, those righteous reasons. And so when you see major political players start to conflate them, there's very few people, I think, understand Bitcoin. There might be, 100 million people worldwide that like really understand Bitcoin. Who knows? Maybe even less than that. So when you're talking to like 95, 99% of the world, and they're seeing these large politicians conflate the two, there is no difference to those people. They don't get it yet. And they likely won't get it for, a decade before they have to get it. And that's the thing, is like, I want to help people get Bitcoin before they have to get it. You want countries to understand that they should monetize all of their energy. They should not leave any energy unchecked or stranded. They should be taking all of that and mining Bitcoin with it, because then that allows them to basically invest in infrastructure, hospitals, airports, roads, and potentially reduce taxes. If you can live in a country where, that country is monetizing all of its energy and it's funding itself partially, at least through Bitcoin mining and through acquiring, somewhat of Bitcoin treasury, and you have a reduced obligation to the government, everyone wins. It's such an incredible time to exist, to like sit back, make a bag of popcorn and just watch the world unfold, especially if you already own Bitcoin.